Hi, my name is Tony and I'm an alcoholic. And today we're going to talk about steps 8 and 9 in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you've been following along, you know that we've already done the first 7 steps. So in step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. In step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. In step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. In step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. In step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And in step 7, we humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. So here we are at step 8. And in step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So steps 8 and 9 are a critical junction in not only our repair of relationships, but in our journey towards a spiritual awakening. It's virtually impossible to have a spiritual awakening unless we're on firm footing with our relationships. It's important that those people that we've harmed, that we make amends to them. And so we have to start with a list of all persons we had harmed in step 8. So how do we do that? Well, we start with the list you made for step 4 when you made the inventory. Hopefully your sponsor directed you not to throw that away, because that can be your starting point. But what we have to do is take responsibility for what we've done, not kind of think, oh, that person hurt me, so I don't need to make an amends. No, it's about keeping our side of the street clean. So you don't think about what so-and-so did to you. You think about what you did to them. If they did something to you to cause it, that's on them. We don't worry about that. That's not part of the 12 steps. So steps 8 and 9 require a lot of honesty. And as I said, taking responsibility. So you're not going to get anywhere unless you're honest to yourself about what you've done, and then you take the responsibility with whomever it is that you've harmed. So let's start by making that list. Let's make a list of all people we have harmed. And again, we're in conjunction with your step 4 list. And so you now have this list, and you're now going to take responsibility and accept the consequences of what the addiction caused you to do. Now, we don't put blame anywhere. We accept responsibility. So what we don't say is, if you hadn't done this to me, I wouldn't have done it to you. And we don't think in those terms. It's about taking responsibility. Step 8 is completely about taking responsibility and being honest with ourselves. So when we are creating the list, we keep that in mind. Because there are some people that are going to have harmed you, and maybe they were even the person that provoked you, but you're taking responsibility for your actions, not theirs. So one final thing about the list that I think is important. Don't justify people off the list. Don't say to yourself, well, so-and-so is somebody who has been nasty to me my whole life, and I just finally reacted. Don't make excuses for reasons not to be on the list. If you even think that they should be on the list, then they should be on the list. I remember when I was doing my steps, I said to my sponsor, I'm not sure whether somebody should be on the list. And he said to me, if you're even considering it, then they should be on the list. So err on the side of making an amends, not justifying them off the list. So one final thing about step 8 is that the list needs to be very thorough. And there may be people in your life that you've harmed that are no longer alive. They still make the list. They are still people that need to have an amends. And in step 9, we'll talk about how that amends comes, but they still need to make the list. Now, as I said, err on the side of having the list be too long rather than be too short. So this needs to be very thorough. These 12 steps are hard work, and you don't get a spiritual awakening just by haphazardly making a list. So be as thorough as you can be. Now it's on to step 9. made amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, I'll explain what that means in a second. But step 9 is a step that we have been probably, my experience has been that we have been probably making amends in one way or another the whole time we've been in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Either we've been jumping steps and trying to make amends because we feel like there are people we need to apologize to. And I would recommend that you don't make those amends until you get to step 9. Or just the way we've lived our lives, that has become an amends to many people. So I'll talk about that again some more in a minute. But it's important that we make amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, what does that mean? In this step, we're talking about making amends to people that may no longer be alive. So how do you make an amends to let's say, a grandmother that maybe you stole drugs from, or that you worried, or for whatever reason you owe that person an amends and she's no longer alive? Well, if you know of a favorite charity of hers, you could donate money to that. Or if not, you could do what's known as a living amends, which means that in circumstances where someone's died, you just live your life differently. Completing the steps and reaching the spiritual awakening will cause you to live your life differently. So that's wherever possible. And then we talk about except when to do so would injure them or others. Now we're talking about someone that you make an amends to, that by making the amends, somebody else gets hurt. And what circumstances are those? Well, I'm going to give you 2, and the big book talks about 2. One is, let's say you had an affair with your next door neighbor's wife. You're not going to go to your next door neighbor and say, hey, I had an affair with your wife and I'm sorry, because now you're putting that marriage in jeopardy, as well as that relationship, and you're sort of getting rid of your guilt, but putting it on somebody else. So you don't make that amends. Okay. Another one might be that if you've been kind of cheating your work out of either time or money, and time might be not giving your best effort, money might be padding an expense account, you don't want to make amends to them, because if you lose your job and your family counts on your support, then you're harming other people. But that doesn't mean that you don't make amends. You just don't do that directly. So again, you can find out what charities either that your next door neighbor or your employer likes, and you can give money to those charities. Or you could simply treat them better, treat your neighbor better, do him favors that he may not even know about that you're doing, but just act in a manner that's making an amends. Now, the level of the amends that you have to make might be very high or it might be very low. And you have to take that into consideration depending on what harm that you have caused. As far as work's concerned, you can just make a pledge to yourself that you're going to give your best efforts all the time at work. And again, if you know the company supports some charity or does something that they believe in strongly that has to do with goodwill, you can help with that too. So remember, step 9 is made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Completing step 9 is a big step in completing all of the steps, because when you've completed step 9, you've now introduced a higher power into your life earlier in the steps, particularly in steps 2 and 3. You've started to live your life differently. You've started to take responsibility. You've started to make amends. And you're really starting to change as a human being. You're well on your way to a spiritual awakening. Now, one last thing about step 9 before we finish. Be careful not to have expectations of whomever you're making the amends to. And by that I mean, don't think that you're going to make an amends to someone and that the relationship is going to be completely repaired. If you're making a heartfelt specific amends, and the person you're making it to has just been hurt too badly or is not ready yet to forgive or move on, you may not get the forgiveness that you're craving or looking for. What you may get is a cold shoulder. Now, I say that to you, even though that circumstance, in my experience, has been very rare. When I did my steps, I had a list of perhaps 20 to 25 people I needed to make amends to. And the person who was closest to me in my life at the time was someone I made an amends to. And he chose not to forgive me, not to want to have a relationship with me any longer. And here I am more than 20 years later, and he still hasn't spoken to me in all that time. And the sad part about that is that we could have had a relationship all these years, and I've kind of grown old. He's older than me, and whatever I did must have been pretty bad that he felt strong enough not to have a relationship with me. I take responsibility for that. It's on me. Not on him, it's on me. And so when that happens, we cannot now think differently about the person. Of course, we can if we choose to, but that won't help you. We have to just keep our side of the street clean and move forward. So don't have expectations, although historically I think you're going to find that if you're doing step 9, you may be 6 months to a year into the program. And if you've been doing the steps diligently, you as a person will have changed enough that almost everybody you work with on making the amends will feel greatly about how you're doing. So you will be accepted for the most part in a very good way, but don't be surprised if some don't. So now that step 9 is over, you probably feel a deep sense of relief. It is a feeling that now you've got the monkey off your back. Now you can feel almost whole again, almost like, okay, everybody that I may have been afraid to talk to because of what I did have been addressed. And that's really one of the purposes of doing steps 8 and 9 is that cleaning up our past. We come into AA and many of us think that if I just stop drinking, everything will be fine. But there is a wreckage of our past. Steps 8 and 9 go a long way to clean up that wreckage. So that's it. That's steps 8 and 9. I hope you get something out of them, and I look forward to doing steps 10, 11, and 12 soon, and hopefully I'll see you then. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.